Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a decent day doing the practice SAT. I know that can be a long day even though it's a half day. And getting ready for tomorrow's test. Hopefully you saw that there are some practice problems on Delta Math. That's not an assignment and you do not have to complete all of them, but that just gives a pretty good sampling of the different kinds of topics we've covered. If you come into the test tomorrow and you have a pretty good understanding of linear, you understand slope, what that means, how you would find it in the different forms, standard, point slope, and slope intercept. If you understand the idea that slope is constant in a linear function, that change is the same all the time, that two functions with the same slope would be parallel graphs, that you know how to graph, you know how to plot a line given any of the forms without using Desmos. You could figure out how to graph those. Or if you had a graph, you could figure out the equation from there. If you have an idea of inequalities, right, that an inequality is essentially the same thing as a linear, or a linear inequality is the same thing as a linear equation, just with that shading, right, above or below the line. If it's greater than or less than, you understand the idea of the dashed line versus the solid line. We talked about that in class yesterday, Monday. If you understand those things and you've worked on some of the assignments and you feel pretty good about that, then I think you're going to be pretty ready for the test. If you have any questions, make sure you bring those to class, and we'll set aside a couple minutes before we start testing. It's not a particularly long test. It shouldn't take you the whole class period, but make sure you have any questions ready ahead of time. Make sure you have your assignments. For the tacos and the muffins, we may spend a minute going over those as well and answering any questions. But hopefully specifically on the muffin one, because we completed most of the taco assignment in class. On the muffin one, I want to see the lines drawn on the graph. So you should have 3 lines drawn on that little grid. Part 1 and Part 2 deal with some of the same context. So most of what you finish on Part 1 will transfer over to Part 2. And so hopefully you see that those are pretty similar. You copy those 3 graphs over onto Part 2, those 3 lines, with the correct shading. And that should allow you to answer the questions on Part 2. In regard to one of the Delta Math questions on solving a system of 3 equations, I think if you look at that and realize that you just do the same process, you just have to do it more than once. You can use elimination, you can use substitution. So you'll need to do something like that possibly on tomorrow's test without doing it graphically. So I'm not looking for you to graph 3 separate lines, but to work it out algebraically. Make sure you know the methods for 2 equations, how to solve them algebraically. That means with elimination and with substitution. Do not rely only on solving systems with graphs. That's a good way to check. And it may be a solution that you can use, but you also will need to know how to do them algebraically. So make sure you're familiar with those processes. If not, come to class with some questions. Other than that, again, I think if you have a good base understanding of what we're covering, this shouldn't be that bad at all. We will take this material and move into our next unit. Much of it will carry with us. So having a good grasp here will not only help us on tomorrow's test, but will help us on the next unit to come. So that's our plan for the rest of the week. Then we have a 4-day weekend coming up, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Some of you are going to be missing part of the day, so you'll get the test earlier in the day from me, and you'll take that most likely during a study hall or possibly during lunch. I think all of us have talked, if that concerns you. If not, I will see you in class after worship, and I look forward to our last day together before break.